Okay guys, Private Jack here. Welcome to part 12 in my series on how to create a butterfly in Blender and get it all the way into Source Filmmaker. Um so anyway, we're at the point where we're going to write QCs. Now, what I plan on doing here is probably 2 QC videos, simply due to the fact that I just tried to do this one on the simple QC and found that I was at 29 minutes. So what we're going to do is we're going to break it into a simple QC and a video on a more advanced QC, showing how to do body groups, texture groups, and that kind of thing. The simple one, we're just going to take our model that we've created in Blender. We've done all the checks on it, and it's scaled properly, and we've got Blender source tools set up properly, and we've exported the model, and we're just going to do a real simple, quick QC just to show you the basic commands. Okay. Now, QC writing is done in a text editor. You can use a text editor like Notepad, but make sure that when you file save the file, you have to make sure that you actually save it as a pure text document. Using Notepad and RTF and the Windows type text editors, you can get extra code added to the text that actually plays havoc with the Studio MDL. I stay away from this particular program, and I use a program called Notepad++. I like Notepad++ because it is simply a programmer's text editor. I've got line numbers. I've got the ability to indent. I can create a template for writing QCs that will change color as I do indents, or I add a curly bracket, or if I add a quotation mark and forget to actually close the quotation mark. I can find the bugs really easily using this tool. So, getting into QC writing. Okay, the first command that we're going to cover is the CD command. And where we use the CD command is if we're going to save the QC to a folder other than where our DMX or SMD files live. And all commands in the QC begin with a $sign. So get used to that right now. So $CD, which means change directory. And all I have to do is put in the directory path to where my DMXs live. So I'm going to open up my little thing here. I'm going to drill into DMX. This is where we save the file, the DMX file to. I'm going to pick up the path, copy that, and open it with curly bracket or a quotation mark, paste it, and close it with a quotation mark. That's all there is to the CD command. So what this is telling it is that you have to go to this folder to find the DMX files. Next command is going to be the model name. And what this is we're telling Studio MDL what to call our MDL and our our VTX and our VVD files. Okay, these are the model files that will be created for our model for Source Filmmaker. The command is $model name, go figure, and what we're going to do is we're going to actually put in a path. However, this path is not a full path. It's relative to the user mod models folder. Okay, what I mean by that is that because of the way we set up Blender source tools, when it talks to Studio MDL, it already knows that we are going to put this model into the file path of Steam, Steam Apps, Common, Source FilmMaker, Game, User Mod. It already knows that. Oh, one other, it also knows that we're going to put it into the models folder here. So it knows that we're going to put it into Steam, Steam Apps, Common, Source FilmMaker, Game, User Mod, Models. Now, my model path is going to be after this. So I want it to go into my private Jack folder, into a folder called Creatures in that folder, and into a Butterfly2 folder after that. So basically, this is the path that I have to put. It already knows that it's going to go to Source FilmMaker, Game, User Mod, Models, but now I have to tell it. I want it to go to Private Jack, Creatures, Butterfly 2. That's the folder I want it to go to. Okay, and I want this model to be called Butterfly 2.mdl. Okay, so this is telling Source Studio MDL where and what where to put the file and what to call it. It's relative to the User Mod Models folder. Okay, so Private Jack, Creatures, Butterfly 2, Butterfly model, Butterfly 2 MDL is the model name that we're going to assign it. Now, if I look at that folder, Private Jack, Creatures, I get in here, I'm going to find that I do not have a Butterfly 2 folder. When this thing compiles, it is going to create this folder. Now, if Private Jack, Creatures, Butterfly 2 didn't exist, it would create Private Jack, Creatures, Butterfly 2. It would create this entire path. Okay, that's done. End. Okay, next thing up for bids would be what makes up the model. Okay, what are the DMX or SMD files that make up this model? And how are we going to identify them? Well, there's 3 different commands that we can use here. We can use the $model command, the $body command, or the $body group command. The $model command is used primarily for character type models that have flexes in the face, and it usually encompasses the head of the actual model. This is where we identify that there is flexes and that Studio MDL has to take care of how it puts the model together. If we're using SMD files, this is where we would specify the VTA file to use and also identify all those, or define all those different flex controllers. With DMX, the only controller that we really have to identify are the I controllers. Go figure. Anyway, for our particular case, our model is pretty simple. It's just made up of one object and a skeleton. So basically, there is only one command here that is used. There are no flexes. We don't have any body groups that we're going to change out. Now, I have a surprise for you when we get into the advanced QC that we'll go into later. Right now, we're just working on a very basic plain Jane type model. Okay, so I am going to use the body command. So it's $body. I identify the name of the body group. This can be any name you want to give it. In my case, I'm just going to call it body. Now what I have to do is identify the DMX file or the SMD file that makes up this part of the body group. And coming back into our little folder here, back up to the desktop, Butterfly DMX, this is the object that makes up our butterfly. So I'm going to grab that. And because I've identified where it lives in the CD command, all I have to do is open a quote, drop in the DMX file, and close the quote. Now, if I didn't identify the actual, no, I'm not even going to go there. Basically, use the CD command if you're not going to put the QC into your DMX folder. Okay, so that's done. Next thing comes a statement that I use in almost all my models. It's $ mostly opaque. There's no other additives to this command. It's just $ mostly opaque. And what this command does is it tells Studio MDL that there may be translucent materials in the model. So what that does is it makes Studio MDL go through, find all the translucent materials, and then it sends it through again to find all the opaque or solid materials. Okay, so this way we get our translucent materials in one pass and our solid materials in a second pass. Now, when you load a model into Source FilmMaker and it comes in and it looks like it's semi-transparent, it's usually because the modeler did not add this command and there are translucent materials in the model. Okay, so that's in. Next one is $CD materials. This is the command that tells Studio MDL where your materials live for the model. Now you can have many CD materials commands, and you need a CD materials command for each folder that you have materials for that particular model. For example, using a TF2 character, you've got the character folder that it finds materials in. There's also a shared folder that it finds materials in. Then there's an effects folder that it finds materials in. Those folders are identified here in the CD materials. Remember back here in Blender Source Tools where I said I'd leave the material path blank? This is why, because if there are more than one folder that these materials live in, then if I put in a hard code here, the file has a tendency of not finding the other materials. Okay, so in this particular case, CD materials is another relative path. When we set up Blender Source Tools, Blender Source Tools knows that the materials that we're going to be using are in a SFM known mod folder, materials folder. So in this case, we're going to use user mod as an example. I'm going to go back into Source FilmMaker, come down to game, go into user mod, materials. So basically, this is user mod is a known mod folder to Source FilmMaker. Materials are where all materials are kept within a mod folder. So Studio MDL knows this. My path here now becomes anything after that materials folder. So I want to keep my materials pretty much related to the actual location of the models. So what will happen is I want my materials to go into user mod, materials, and then models, private jack, creatures, butterfly 2. So my statement here is going to be models, no opening slash, models, private jack, not pet jack, private jack, creatures, butterfly 2. Now, some people say you have to put a closing slash in here. Some people say you don't have to. I usually do, and it doesn't matter which direction the slash goes. You can actually have mixed slashes like this. Studio MDL is smart enough to know that this is a folder break. But just to keep things clean, I like to keep my slashes all going in the same direction, and make sure you close it off with a closing bracket if you open it up, or a closing quotation mark if you open it up with an opening quotation mark. Now, the thing about materials is that Studio MDL will not create material folders. You have to do that yourself. So what we're going to do is we're going to come into our folder, okay, user mod materials, models, private jack, creatures, and we're going to create the butterfly 2 folder. New folder, butterfly 2. Now that we're here, we may as well move that texture that we've created for our model into the folder. So let's open up another session of Explorer. I'm just going to press Control N. Oops. Make sure I've got it selected. Control N to open up a new session. Come back up to my desktop. I said come back up to my desktop. Go into that butterfly folder and find my butterfly VTF. I'm going to grab it and I'm going to copy it into that folder. So the butterfly VTF is here. And I also created a blue and a red butterfly texture so I can show you texture groups. We're not going to get into texture groups in this video. We'll do that in the advanced video. Okay, so now I've got that texture in there. Where'd you go? Texture is in there. It's there, but it's not ready for use yet. We have another video to go through to write the VMTs for this. Okay, so that's there. The next command would be hitboxes. Hitboxes is a video on its own as well. We're not going to get into hitboxes in this QC writing period. We have to use HalfLife Model Viewer to create hitboxes, so that's going to be a separate video. We'll skip over hitboxes for now, and I'll just comment in here, must do video on hitboxes. And these double lines here indicate that there is a comment in the actual file. This thing is read down to here, finds these double slashes, and skips over it. Another way to comment is using a /* and then anything in between Okay, so I've just added those. I want those all to be commented out. I'm going to add a */ now to close off the comment. So anything that I could either have gone through and added a double slash on each and every individual line, but I wanted to do a block comment, and this is how you do a block comment. Use a /* and then anything in between the /* and the */ is a comment. Okay, so that is a comment. Next thing we're going to do is we are going to add sequences. Every model must have at least one sequence. It's the sequence that the model actually loads into the game in. It can be a pose, it can be just an idle sequence, anything. The first sequence command that Studio MDL comes across is going to be the default sequence for that model. So I usually start mine off with an idle sequence where the model is doing absolutely nothing. So I add the sequence command, add a name for it, and this is how simple it is to create a sequence. Just come up here to your first body DMX file, copy that, and drop it in there. Next thing we'd have to do is we have to tell it how fast this thing is going. So like we have to give it an FPS rate. Because this model isn't actually moving, this DMX file, there's no animation inside that DMX, I can give this an FPS rate of 1. Or I could give it an FPS rate of 120. It's not doing anything, okay? It's just sitting there doing nothing. FPS 1 is good. Now, we do have an animation. Remember we added that flap animation? This guy? Well, now we're going to add this. And sequences loop, okay, when we load them into Source FilmMaker. When we do the import a sequence, they loop, which is why we actually stop this at frame 23, because frame 1 is back to 0, right? So it goes from 0 all the way through the entire flap down to the frame before at frame 23, 0, and then loops back to 0 or to the first frame and starts the loop again. So what we're doing is we're stopping any possible double take of a frame, which would cause a glitch or a stutter in the actual animation. So to get this thing into the model, what we have to do is we have to give it another sequence, and you can have as many sequences as you want. And we're going to call this one flap. And now what I have to do is I have to go and find that flap animation. So back into our DMX folder. And when we did the export, it exported to this folder called anims. Okay? With a CD statement or having the QC in the DMX folder, all paths become relative. So all I have to do is identify where this thing is living without a slash in front, and then give it its DMX name. Again, I open it with a curly bracket, drop down here, and because I created this sequence at 24 frames per second, I have to make sure that I give it the same frame rate as what I created the animation in. So FPS 24. Close off the curly bracket, and this simple QC is now done. Now, we told Blender Source Tools where we were going to save our QC file. Okay, remember when we set it up? Watch what happens when I save this QC file. So I come in here, I'm going to do a file, save as, and I'm going to point to that butterfly DMX folder that I had told Blender Source Tools where I was going to put it. I'm going to name this butterfly2 .qc. And this is another hiccup using Notepad from Microsoft. You can put a .qc in there and it will actually name the file butterfly2.qc.txt. Okay, you have to go back and take that .txt off the end of the file name if you use the Microsoft Notepad to do your QCs. With Notepad++, I tell it it's butterfly.qc, and that's what it saves. So I'm just going to open up that folder here. This is where it's going to go. Watch in here, and watch what happens over here when I save the file. Okay, so the file is saved in here, and poof, this turns to gray, it's ready to go, and it gives me a button down here that I can push to run my QC. I can compile the model directly from Blender. I don't have to use a crowbar. I don't have to use any of those other compiling methods that people tell you to use. Okay, now that is a simple QC. This thing is now ready to run and compile the model. With that, I am going to close off this particular video, and I'm going to do another one on an advanced QC. And in that advanced QC, what we're going to do is we're going to use another butterfly model that I have actually split back out into individual elements so that I have more than one DMX file that I have to compile. And on top of that, what I've done is I've actually given this guy a helmet and a ball cap. So we're going to use body groups and have the butterfly either have nothing on its head, or we're going to have it have a helmet or the hat on its head. So that's going to be covered in the advanced QC writing tutorial that I'm going to do next. So with that, what I'm going to say is private jack out